Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming and gracing us with your presence. Just to announce, Be'ezer Hashem, next week, Suka building. Next week on Tuesday there will also be a class, Bli Neder. It will be a Sukkah's class. So that's going to be next Tuesday as well, 9:30 a.m. Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach. Everybody is invited. Today's class is dedicated by Mrs. Gila Klein in honor of Mrs. Miriam Klein for her gracious hosting and hospitality that was extraordinary in Bnei Brak, for her family and everything she does for so many people constantly. Thank you very much. And for this class as well. And everybody should be blessed, you and everybody should be blessed with an amazing, incredible, blessed year, a Gmar Chasima Taiva, and a good gebenched year for you, your families, your loved ones, B'toich Kol Beis Yisrael, a year of tremendous bracha and hatzlacha, ad b'lidai, health, happiness, prosperity, nachas. All your heart's desires should be fulfilled in the most revealed and manifested way. And the main thing is it should be a year of complete victory and complete redemption. Amen. Shnaz Geula. Okay, there's one source sheet. It's double-sided. If you didn't take it, please take it. It's two sides, yeah. One of the most frequent challenges that is very regular, very normal, many people have, is cultivating the art of consistency. And not just consistency in the sense of being consistent with something, which obviously is vital and important to cultivate any success and master any skill and get things done in an efficient manner, but also in the sense that very often people have a vision of something or clarity about something. I may make a resolution as a result. I may have a certain deep awareness that has a very positive effect. But then different circumstances come, times change, sometimes even a few minutes, a few hours later, and everything seems to be gone. Sometimes a person is in a certain state of mind, there's such clarity and conviction and commitment. People might make a very powerful resolution, might find something, a spark, and they say, this is how I'm going to be, this is who I want to be, this is who I really am. And it seems so obvious and clear, this is how it's going to be, and it's going to be forever this way. But then, sometimes just a few minutes pass, or certainly a few hours and a few days, v'haya kalai haya. It fades into oblivion, it's gone with the wind, and you wonder, am I a hypocrite? Am I inconsistent? Am I inauthentic? How does one deal with this? The Pasuk says in Tehillim famously, Mi yala b'har Hashem, u'mi yakum b'mkaim katsha nekich hapayim of our levav. We say it in the song of Sunday, Shir Shlayam of Sunday. Who will come up, who will climb the mountain of Hashem, and who will stand on his holy place, nekich hapayim, somebody who has clean hands, honest, authentic, bar levav, a pure heart. So there's two things. There's miyala b'har Hashem, miyakum b'mkaim katshay. Who will climb the mountain and who will stand there? Because climbing a mountain has an adventurous aspect to it. Remaining on the mountain, this already requires a different skill. Everybody we know went on a diet. Of course, I'm still working on it. To climb the mountain, you're going to climb the mountain. You'll give me 6 days and I'll be on top of the mountain. Maintaining something throughout, taking on a journey which goes through the day-to-day vicissitudes of people's lives, that's already a different skill. There's miyala and there is mi yakum b'mkaim katsha. And this is true especially this time of the year, when Elul comes, Rosh Hashanah comes, Yom Kippur. It's always a time of reckoning, of cheshbon, in a positive way, of looking in, of scrutinizing, of examining, of repenting, of making amends, of reinventing ourselves, of enhancing. And every person always wants to grow, certainly everybody in this class. And as a result, people sometimes, reach very deep moments. There's moments of clarity, of inspiration, of spirituality, of dveikus, of connection. There's hachlatos, there's kabbalas, there's resolutions people make, and etc. All very, very powerful and potent. But sometimes a person feels, is it really inauthentic because, then comes a regular Wednesday, a regular Tuesday, and when life gets back to normal, and when I I'm dealing with the same things that may have not been dealt with really inside, and the triggers come up again, will I even have the know-how of how to deal with it? And today, in this Shir Be'ezer Hashem, we're going to explore this, and especially in connection to Yom Kippur, but through one of the unsung heroes in Jewish history. It's fascinating, Judaism and the Jewish people have many what you would call great people, women and men throughout all the generations. Many of them are very famous, justifiably renowned, popular. Their names are on our lips frequently. They're studied about. But there are some whose heroic greatness, surprisingly, is not very well known. And some people whose heroic acts were done in such a clandestine way. They weren't promoted. Nobody sent out WhatsApp messages about it. There were no pictures taken. There were no videos taken. It was done, as the Navi says, Hatznei aleches im Hashem Elokecha, with very discreetly and modestly, but nonetheless made a mark to this very day. And two of such people we're going to discuss today. One is a man named Palty ben Layash, Palty the son of Layash. And the second person is a woman named Michal bas Shaul, the daughter of Shaul HaMelech, whose name was Michal. I would like to say that they were husband and wife, because officially they were husband and wife, but it's much more complicated than that. So that's why I'm saying Michal and Palty, they looked like husband and wife, but it was very, very complicated. Let's get to the story here. It's a difficult story, it's a challenging story, and certainly we're not going to be able to explore all aspects of the story today, which goes back to the conflict between Shaul and David, the first two kings of the Jewish people. But we're going to be addressing, Be'ezer Hashem, one aspect of it, and that is the daughter of Shaul, Michal, and how that played out in Jewish history. If you'll take a look at your first source sheet, this takes us to Shmuel Aleph, Perek Yud Ches. Shmuel Aleph, Perek Yud Ches is, of course, Samuel 1, chapter 18. The Tanakh says, and we quote, this is the original source from the Tanakh, from the Navi. Vatahav Michal bas Shaul as David. David, who has already been introduced to Shaul, he was a young shepherd, but he achieved a stunning defeat against Goliath, against Goliath, David against Goliath, and he managed to kill and eliminate the greatest arch enemy of the Jewish people, the Hassan Nasrallah of his age, who was Goliath. He was a giant, he was powerful, he was mighty, he was ferocious, and he was a Plishti, he was a Philistine. By the way, the word Palestine was named by the Romans after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. They wanted to add insult to injury. So they renamed Judea to Palestine to name it for the Philistines, the Plishtim, who were yet there in the ancient times and would torment the Jews for many generations. So that's why the Romans named it Palestine. They also tried to change the name of Yerushalayim, I think Tayala Capitolana, but that didn't stick. But their other change stuck. So Goliath was a Plishti. He was a Philistine. And Goliath was killed by David HaMelech. As a result, David gained tremendous renown by the Jewish people because he really defeated their arch enemy, the Plishtim. Then their goal was the destruction of the Jewish people. Vatav Michal bas Shaul as David. Michal, the daughter of Shaul, loved David. Vayagidu l'Shaul. They shared this with Shaul. Vayisher hadavar be'einav. He liked the idea. But this was not so simple. Shaul had a profound enmity to David HaMelech, as you know. Vayomer Shaul said, Etnen aloi, I will give Michal to David. Utihiloi l'mayka shusiyi bayad plishtim. Shaul made a deal with David. If he kills Goliath and he kills 100 Plishtim who wanted to destroy the Jewish people, then he can have Michal. But there was also another side, and that is that Shaul, due to his profound enmity to David, and we're not going to get in now to the source of that enmity and how we explain it, it's a very, very tough and challenging story, but there was profound enmity any way you want to spin it and explain it. He said, maybe David will be killed in the battlefield. Usihi bayad plishtim. But that didn't happen. David was successful. He killed them, and now Shaul fulfilled his vow. Vayitan lo Shaul es Michal bita leisha. So Shaul gave his daughter Michal to David as a wife. So David now got married to Michal. Vayar Shaul vayeda ki Hashem im David uMichal bas Shaul ahavaso. Shaul saw and he knew that Hashem is with David. And Michal, his daughter, ahavaso, she had a real affection, a liking for David. Vayosef Shaul liroi mipnei David, leiroi mipnei David oid, vayishol oyev es David kol hayam. Shaul was feared, he feared David exceedingly, and for all of his days, Shaul became an enemy, an oyev of David. Oyev is a fight, an enemy of David. As the Tanakh continues later, Shaul regretted this marriage. And Shaul, Chazal say, there's a whole discussion of this in the Mefarshim and in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, page 19. Shaul felt, halachically, that the marriage itself was technically flawed, and therefore legally she was not married to David. So the Tanakh says, chapter 25, Shmuel, Aleph, V'Shaul nasan as Michal bitay eishes David lefalti ben Yayish asher migalim. There was a man named Palti, his father's name was Layish, he came from a city called Galim. Shaul took Michal from David and gave Michal to a new husband who is Palti ben Layish. That's the story of the Tanakh. Okay, well, it's right there in the Tanakh. I promise you I did not make this up this morning. I quoted it, I went to Safari and I took it from there. And I happen to know the story before too. Okay. It's one of the stories they did not teach. Okay. Now here, now it's a challenging story, it's a difficult story, it's a complicated story, but there's one aspect that is particularly disturbing. How did Palti respond to this? What did he do? He was in a very difficult situation. Why? He didn't agree with Shaul. He felt that Michal's marriage to David was an absolute legal marriage. It was a halachic marriage. So she's a married woman. She's an Eshes Ish. He can't be with her. On the other hand, the king took her from David, gave it to Palti, and for him to stand up to the king would have been very risque, especially such a sensitive thing, because of David's relationship to Shaul, his former son-in-law, or present son-in-law, depends how you look at it. So what did Palti do? On this, our sages have a tradition. It's a very, very intense tradition. What happened here? And you could see it, the second source, Sanhedrin, Daf Yutes Amid Beis. This is Talmud Sanhedrin. Rabbi Yochanan says, Ma asa. What did he do? What did Palti do? He's officially married to a woman he's not allowed to be married to because she is married to somebody else. No'atz cherev beinoy lebeino. He embedded a sword in the bedroom between him and her. V'amar, and he said, Kala oisik bedavar zeh, yidaker becherev zeh. Anyone who engages in relations shall be stabbed by this sword. That's what Palti ben Layish does. And this goes on for years. They're married not for a week, they're married for years. So Chazal are testifying that throughout all this time, both Michal and Palti behaved in the most moral, sensitive, holy, sacred way, that even though officially they were married, Michal and Palti understood they were not married, even though they were together in one home. How does anybody achieve this type of control? Especially, the Gemara says in Maseches Megillah that one of the most beautiful women in history was Michal bas Shaul, to the point that anybody who even just saw her was enthralled, and the Gemara is very detailed about the powerful impact. This is what type of person she was, inner and outer beauty. And he was with her in the same house. So the Gemara just tells this story, that he takes a sword, he puts it there, and he says, whoever does the wrong thing, whoever crosses, boundaries, whoever passes the border, whoever does the wrong thing and is engaging in promiscuous behavior, yidaka b'charev zeh, shall be stabbed by this sword. That's what the Gemara is telling us here. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said about this story, he said as follows. Toikfoi shel Yosef. The moral greatness of Yosef, Yosef's power, is anvasnusay shel Bayas. Relative to what Bayas did is considered small. Yosef, we know, withstood a tremendous test. The Torah says in Parshas Vayeshev that Potiphar's wife, his master's wife, took a liking to Yosef, and she would constantly plead with him that he should be with her. Yosef said no, Vayemoyin, he refused. And he told her, how can I do this? You have a husband. He's entrusted me with the entire home, with all of his estates, besides you, because you're his wife. How can I sin to God? How can I do such a bad thing? Betray you, betray your husband, betray Hashem? I can't. And one day he came home, there was nobody home, we all know the story, and he grabbed her, and Vayonas, Yosef escaped outside. She grabbed him, and Yosef escaped, and the cloak remained by her, and that's what she used as proof that he was trying to violate her, and ultimately he was cast into prison. This is considered a tremendous moment that demonstrated Yosef's spiritual sensitivity and morality, especially as he was 17 years old in a far country, an orphan, without family, without brothers, without a father. His father thought he was gone. And nonetheless, Yosef remained loyal to his soul, to his God. That's amazing. Comes Rabbi Yochanan and said, that's true. But it doesn't come close to what happened with Boaz. What happened with Boaz is a story in Rus in chapter 3, where Rus comes to Boaz, and it's the middle of the night, and Boaz is lying there in the middle of the night. Nobody is there. He's by his silo, and Rus comes near him. And nonetheless, the Tanakh says that Boaz remained completely loyal to his spiritual core, and ultimately he would wait till the morning, and then he would marry Rus in a conventional halachic way. So Rashi says, why is that so much greater than Yosef? Because Yosef was never with her. Rashi says, b'mita achas, in the same bedroom. He was working in the house. But with Boaz, it was the middle of the night with her. They were lying, therefore it was more difficult. So Rabbi Yochanan says, the greatness of Yosef is amazing, but it's anvasnusay shel Boaz. It's humble relative to Boaz. And then he says, toikvay shel Boaz, anvasnusay shel Palti ben Layish. Boaz's moral greatness is nothing compared to Palti ben Layish. It's humble. Boaz and Yosef would be humbled before Boaz, and Boaz would be humbled before Palti ben Layish. Why? Rashi says by Boaz it was one night. By Palti ben Layish it's a situation that went on for years. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, my diksiv, the pasuk says in Mishlei, Shlomo HaMelech says, Rabbis banos asu chayil va'at alis al kulana. Many daughters have done amazing things, but you excelled above all. Rabbis banos asu chayil ze Yosef u Boaz va'at alis al kulana ze Palti ben Layish. Many daughters have done great things. This is Yosef and Boaz. But va'at alis al kulana, you are reached above all of them. That is Palti ben Layish. Much greater than Yosef, much greater than Boaz. Amar Reb Shmuel bar Nachman Amar Reb Yonis. My diksiv, it says in Mishlei, the same chapter, Eishes Chayil, Mishlei, Proverbs 31. Sheker achein vehevel hayofi. Sheker achein ze Yosef, hevel hayofi ze Boaz, yiras Hashem itishalo ze Palti ben Layish. Sheker achein means grace can be deceitful. Hevel, yofi, beauty can be vain. The woman who's yiras Hashem, who has awe of God, she shall truly be praised. So this is a symbolism, a remez, a hint. Sheker achein refers to Yosef. He was full of grace. Hevel hayofi refers to Boaz, full of beauty. But it's called sheker, which means deceitful or a lie, and hevel is vanity. Who is the isha yiras Hashem tishalo? The true fear of God. This is Palti ben Layish. Wow. So you could see here what the sages felt about Palti ben Layish. Yosef is considered one of the greatest of the greats in all of Jewish history. In fact, he's the only one who's called tzaddik. Even Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, we don't call them hatzaddik. The other shvatim, they're all tzaddikim, but we don't call them tzaddik. Yosef is the one person who got the name hatzaddik, and the Zohar says it was because of that test that he withstood. Nonetheless, they're saying Yosef is humbled before Boaz. Boaz is humbled before Palti ben Layish. Boaz is considered, Boaz married Rus, the great-grandparents of David HaMelech, the father and mother of the dynasty of David and of Mashiach, who all come from Boaz and Rus. Boaz came from the tribe of Yehuda. Boaz was a shofet, he was a judge. Palti ben Layish is not so known. Until today is not known. Like you said, you didn't even know the story before. But here you see, they say this is Sheker, this is Hevel. Isha yiras Hashem, Palti ben Layish. At alis al kulana, Palti ben Layish. We have to understand how Chazal could say about Yosef, Sheker hachein, about Boaz, Hevel hayofi. Even if you want to say that Yosef and Boaz don't reach the level of Malti ben Layash and he exceeded them. But to say that Yosef's spiritual chen and grace was sheker, was a lie, hevel ayof, it's difficult to understand what that means. But here we really want to understand the actual story. Because we see here that Chazal is saying that in the history of Tanakh, there's no two people who display so much self-control, so much moral clarity, so much self-mastery and moral discipline like these two people. Michal, the daughter of Shaul, and Palti, the son of Layish. And the question is, how did this happen? What was the mechanism? What did they do? So you'll say the Gemara says, he put a sword and he said, whoever crosses the border, if you cross the red lines, you're going to get stabbed. But let's understand that. What does this even mean? As we say in Talmudic language, mimanavshach. However you look at it is difficult. If they both have a moment of weakness and they want to surrender to craving and temptation, what's the sword going to help? They could tell the sword, okay, you stay there, we're good. We'll meet you later. It's not like they had guards around the house holding swords. The sword was there. If they both agree to ignore the sword, they ignore the sword. If they don't agree, they don't need a sword. If one of them is weak and the other one is strong, they don't need a sword. If both of them are weak, what they want to do and they have to do, they don't need a sword. So what does the Gemara even mean? Not cherev. He takes a sword, puts it in. What is that supposed to be? We're going to change the subject and come back to it, Be'ezer Hashem. Because in this story of Palti ben Layash, we have a template of not only the art of consistency, but what it means to live with a higher state of consciousness, even in moments that we are not fully in touch with it. On Yom Kippur, we read the Torah twice, Shachris and Mincha, in the morning and in the afternoon. If you were on the committee to choose which section of the Torah should be read on Yom Kippur, probably it's not so hard to guess. There's one parsha that deals with Yom Kippur. It's Parshas Acharei Mos. There the Torah gives the entire schedule of what Yom Kippur looked like in the holy Mishkan, in the sanctuary, and of course later in the Beis HaMikdash. It was the one day of the year that the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, would go in, Bezois Yavei Aaron Ala Kodesh, would go into the Holy of Holies. And there was a whole series of offerings and services that were done exclusively on that one day of the year, Achaz Bashana, and it's recorded in the first half of Parshas Acharei Mos in detail. The Kohen Gadol went 5 times to the mikveh that day, as he changed from one set of garments to another set of garments, from golden garments to linen garments, back to golden, back to linen, back and forth. And he did various services. Some were done every single day of the year, and some were unique to Yom Kippur, especially, as I said, going into the Holy of Holies. That's the morning reading. Makes a lot of sense. And it finishes that Hashem says this will be an eternal day of forgiveness and a day of atonement, a day of fasting, a day of sanctity and cleansing. That's the morning reading. What is the afternoon reading of Yom Kippur, Mincha? The second half of Parshas Acharei Mos. But that doesn't have to do with Yom Kippur. That's actually a list of what's known as Parshas Arayos. All the promiscuous, forbidden relationships that the Torah forbids. And it starts off. Hashem tells Moshe to tell the Jewish people, do not emulate the ways of Egypt. Do not follow the cultures and the tradition, the behaviors in terms of relationships that they did in Egypt. Ukamaise Eretz Canaan, and don't emulate the inhabitants of Canaan who were completely lacked boundaries in relationships, and all forms of promiscuity were not only allowed, but they were very, very common. And he gives a whole list, and it's a very, very detailed graphic list, which you can hear in the Kriyas HaTorah of Mincha and Yom Kippur. If you're going to be in Shul, you can look it up in Chumash. It starts off with a person not being with their mother, and not being with their sister, and not being with their father's sister, and not being with all the close family relationships, and not being with a woman who's married, and with a male, and with an animal. Extremely, all these types of things. And it says, don't contaminate yourselves and your land, because the land has vomited and expelled those who contaminated it. That's the mincha of Yom Kippur. And here comes a very, very obvious question. And that is, in Yiddish there's an expression, Ayavan and Suka. You remember Ayavan and Suka? It means a Greek and a Suka. I don't know how that works in English. But it seems a little strange. It's true as part of Parshas Acharei Mos. But you're talking now about the holiest time of the year. A Jew is in shul, it's already Yom Kippur afternoon. They've been there much of the day. Everybody is fasting. On Yom Kippur it says, we're daimim kamalachim, everybody's like an angel, disengaged from the material world, all the 5 things that are forbidden Yom Kippur. We don't eat them, we don't drink them, we don't bathe them, we don't anoint them, we don't wear shoes, and we don't engage in relations, all the things that we don't do on Yom Kippur. It's like daimim kamalachim, you wear white, beyond eating, beyond drinking. There's a sanctity in Yom Kippur that envelops every single person, and we know even people who all year might not come to shul, Yom Kippur is unique. You would think if you have to choose the reading of Yom Kippur, what, do you need something? Oh, I'll take care. It's fine. You don't have to. Thank you. If you choose the right, thank you. If you choose the right reading of Yom Kippur, it seems a little difficult to understand that this is what Jews need to hear at this moment about not having relations with an animal, etc., etc. These are important halachas. These are the foundations of moral civilization. But I'm just thinking, if a rabbi has to prepare a Yom Kippur sermon. Every rabbi prepares Yom Kippur sermons because Yom Kippur is the big day when everybody comes to shul. And finally, as people from the entire community doesn't see a whole year, and he gets up to speak, what's the message going to be? You want to say something that really inspires the soul, that touches them, to speak about the most basic things of morality that people should stay away from. I mean, it's the foundation of everything. But isn't it squandering the opportunity, and isn't it even denigrating the moment when people are in such a state of loftiness and sublimity and sanctity? People are wearing their kitlach, they're completely dressed in white. There's a kedusha, sanctity that envelops the Jewish soul. And at that moment they say there's one thing you have to hear: don't emulate the disgusting, perverted, abominable behaviors that were done in Egypt and in Canaan. It's a gewalt that this is the message, and it's not shachris, it's mincha. Which brings us to another question. Why did the Torah juxtapose these 2 parshas in Acharei Mos? If there's one parsha that combines extremes, it's Acharei Mos. The first half is about the holiest day of the year. The second half is about the most unholy acts in the world. It's like, put it in 2 separate parshas. The first half is about heaven, Yom Kippur, the Holy of Holies, and the same parsha, the second half, speaks, and now I don't want you to do what they did in these places, and he goes through the whole list of promiscuous relationships. It seems like the juxtaposition is also very, very strange. The names in Judaism and Yiddishkeit are always precise. A name is very meticulous. People's names, things' names. Adam is the one who gave names to all the animals because the name represents the energy through which the divine energy animates everything. This is also true the names of Parshiyas. They have a lot of significance. If you think about the name of the Parsha of Yom Kippur, it's Acharei. What does Acharei mean? After. But Acharei doesn't seem to have any message. What does the word Acharei? It happens to be one of the first words in the Parsha. Acharei Moshe Shnei Bnei Aaron. Hashem spoke to Moshe after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron. So it's almost a technical term. Acharei. Acharei Moshe. But if it's a name, it means that the name actually captures the essence of that which was given the name. How does the name Acharei, after, capture the essence of this parsha? One of the most interesting and fascinating services that was done on Yom Kippur was when the high priest went into the Holy of Holies with blood. There were 2 offerings that were brought on Yom Kippur. One was known as a par, an ox, and one was known as a soyer, as a goat. These were brought as a chatas, as an atonement for the Kohen Gadol himself, or the high priest himself, his family, all of the Kohanim. And of course, you had also the goat for all of the Jewish people. He slaughtered these animals. Usually the blood was sprinkled on the Mizbeach, on the outer altar. It was once a year that the Kohen Gadol would take in the blood of the ox and of the goat, and he would sprinkle it right in front of the Aron, right in front of the Holy Ark where the Luchas are. He would sprinkle it right in front of there, and the blood would fall on the ground of the Holy of Holies. This was a unique avodah done only on Yom Kippur. Then he would take out the container, the cup, the goblet with the blood, and he would sprinkle it in front of the paroiches, the curtain that separated the Holy of Holies from the heichel, from the regular chamber. And then on the inner altar, on the corners of the inner altar, the golden altar on the corners and in the middle, only on Yom Kippur this was done. If you'll take a look in your next source, how many times, this is the Yuma Dafnan Hayamad Aleph, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sixth verse. One time and then one time out. Very good. So the Torah says that he had to sprinkle the blood in the Holy of Holies 8 times. One upward, like this, one upward, and one down. It didn't go onto the ark. It was in front of it. It didn't go onto the kapyrus, onto the ark or the lid of the ark. But it was in front of it. One time was up, and then 7 times down. And they would all fall on the ground of the Holy of Holies. When he would sprinkle the blood, he would count. And you know, in the Musaf of Yom Kippur, it's called Avodah. We go through the whole service of Yom Kippur. It's a very special part of Yom Kippur davening. Especially if you understand everything, it's really reliving and re-experiencing what happened in the Beis Hamikdash. It goes through literally the whole day's schedule from beginning to end, including all the kaidim, the prostrating, and this is one of them. And we even have a special niggin, a melody in most communities that they sing when they do the count. And here's how the Mishnah says. The Kohen Gadol takes the blood, so first he has the ox, and he starts sprinkling the blood. Achas lamayla, 1 up, and sheva lamata, 7 down. And he would count, v'kacha yamayna. And as he says, achas, achas v'achas, achas ushtayim, 1, 1 and 1, 1 and 2, tanu rabbanon. Achas, and this is usually how it's done. Achas, and then achas v'achas, achas ushtayim, achas v'shalosh, etc. In many communities there's a niggin. Achas, achas v'yachas, achas ushtayim, achas v'shalosh, achas v'yarba, achas v'chamesh, achas v'sheish, achas v'sheva. So it's 1, 1 up, and then 1 down. So you do 1 plus 1. 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 1 and 5, 1 and 6, 1 and 7. He's done. Same thing he does with the goat. Divrei Reb Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, of course we have to argue about everything. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it's not how he does it. Achas, 1. Achas v'yachas, 1 and 1. Shtayim v'yachas, 2 and 1. Shalosh v'achas, arba v'achas, chomesh achas, sheish v'achas, sheva v'achas. You hear the difference? Reb Meir says, the first opinion Reb Meir says, you start with achas, the 1, and then you go to the higher numbers. Rabbi Yehuda says, no. You start with the higher numbers, then you go back to 1. Seems like completely a technical argument. What's the difference? The point is, you're counting. And you're counting how many times you sprinkle the blood, and you sprinkle them 8. But 1 is upwards, and the 7 are down. So you make a distinction. So you say achas, 1. Then you start the counting below. So you do achas, va'achas, 1, and now 1. Achas ushtayim, 1 and 2. Then you do the third one below, which is really the 4th. So you do achas v'shalosh. Then you do the 4th one, which is really the 5th. So you do achas plus arba, achas plus chamesh. Clear. Rabbi Yehuda says same thing, but the exact opposite way. You start with 1 up, you do 1. Then you go down, so you do 1 plus 1. Now you do a second one down, so you do 2 plus 1. You do a third one, which is really a 4th. You do 3 plus 1. So the Gemara says it's not really an argument, but there were different traditions how everybody did it in their place. Where Reb Meir lived, this is how they said it. Where Rabbi Yehuda lived, this is how they said it. Nonetheless, whenever there's an argument between Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, between the sages, there's some depth, there's some difference. So I want to ask anybody, what is the difference between saying 1 and 1, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 1 and 5, 1 and 6, 1 and 7, or 1 and 1, yeah, and then you go 2 and 1, 3 and 1, 4 and 1, 5 and 1. The point is, there's the 1, and now there's another 7. But now there's another question. In the next source, the kol alma miyazarish and etzrichem minyanim kalachas v'achas. My time, why do you have to even do this? Why do you have to do achas, achas v'achas, achas ushtayim? Why can't you just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like we do? 1 and 1. So Taka makes for a nice niggin. Achas, achas v'yachas, achas ushtayim. So you could just do shtayim, shalosh, arba. What's the reason for this? So the commentators explain they didn't want to just do 8 because the Torah wants us to distinguish between 1 on top and 7 on the bottom. Okay, so do 1. You finished. Now start 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Even if you don't want to mix them together because it's 2 separate categories. So do 1. I'm done. Now do 7. No, 1 and 1. 1 and 2, 1 and 3. Of course, on this there's also an argument. Rebbe Lezer says he may come to make a mistake. If he just does 1 and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, he may make a mistake and think the first 1 is the first of the 7, and he'll end up doing only 7. He'll do 1 and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's where he does 1, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4. So he keeps that 1 separate. It's difficult to understand because you're not dealing with hundreds of numbers. You're dealing with 8. So you could do 1 and then do another 7. Do we really think the Kohen Gadol will get confused? But that's what Rebbe Lezer says. Then the Gemara says a second opinion that you learn it out from a pasuk. You learn out from a pasuk that you have to repeat you have to repeat the 1 a second time. Both opinions are very difficult. I mean, people count 7. It's not the end of the world. You really think he's going to get confused? And why would the Torah want you have to do achas, achas, va'achas, achas, shtayim? What is even the significance of sprinkling 1 above, 7 below? And again, why this argument between Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda? If you start with 1, you start with 2, you start with 1, you start with 3, you start with 1, you start with 4. I just have a bad cold, forgive me. I have enough. Thank you. Let me summarize our questions in 30 seconds so we can get to the answers. Be'ezer Hashem. So we began with the story of Palti ben Layish and Michal. Palti ben Layish remained completely moral and loyal, and the Gemara says, how did he do it? He did it by putting a sword in the bed and saying whoever crosses boundaries is going to be stabbed. And we explained it doesn't seem to work because if they want to, they want to. They don't need a sword, and they don't want to, they'll ignore the sword. There were no video cameras being scrutinized by Shaul or anybody else. And Shaul is the one who actually wanted them to be married, so he anyway wouldn't mind. How do we explain it? What is the Gemara trying to say? What did he actually do? Was there a physical sword? Is this symbolic? What does it even mean? We also wanted to know how you could call Yosef's morality sheker and Boaz's morality hevel. True, it may not be like Palti ben Layish, it didn't go on for years, but still. Then we went on to explain why, to ask why Mincha Yom Kippur do we learn about things that seem so inappropriate and so immoral, which are important to know, but it seems that it's the wrong time, the wrong place when a person is in such a highly state. We asked why the Torah juxtaposes these 2 parshas that are so extreme in one parsha, and what's the meaning of the name Acharei, which means after. What's the depth in the word after? And then finally we asked what is the significance of sprinkling 1 above, 7 below? And why did the count have to happen in such a strange way where you have to repeat the 1 every time when you do the other 7? You can't just do 2 separate counts. And what is the argument between Meir and Rabbi Yehuda if you first say 1 and then 2 and 3, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 1 and 5, 1 and 6, or you do 7 and 1, or you 6 and 1, or 5 and 1, it would seem mamish the same thing. Is there any depth in the argument? And here we'll see how in Judaism things are connected in very profound and intricate ways. And it's all in the word acharei. The word acharei has it all. And that's why that's the name. What does the word acharei mean? Afterwards. Acharei is telling you one message. There's always an after. There's a class now, but there's after the class. It's Yom Kippur today, but there's also after Yom Kippur. It's Rosh Hashanah today, but there's after Yom Kippur. There's a wedding going on right now. We're standing at a chuppah, I know. But there's acharei. There's a day later, there's a month later, a week later, a year later, a decade later, a century later. And before you know it, it's a millennium later. Ki elef shanim beinecha, ki yom esmal. There's an acharei. Why is it so important? We're here. What do they say? Be present. This is not a war on being present, on the contrary. It's truly being present, understanding how reality works in a very authentic way. I am here right now. I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing right now. It may be extremely potent, powerful, enthralling, inspirational, profound, maybe life-changing. But there's acharei. There's afterwards. Afterwards is the knowledge that just because something is very, very clear today, it does not mean that every single trigger in my system has been healed. It does not mean that every broken component in my psyche has been repaired. It does not mean that my thoughts will forever, henceforth, remain aligned with ultimate truth. It means that now I had the privilege of tuning in, perhaps, to something very real, very pure, very authentic, but there's acharei. This becomes so critical to understand because if my present awareness does not encompass the acharei, if it doesn't have a method of dealing with the acharei, what often happens is when the acharei comes, when the acharei kicks in, when the next stage kicks in, I have no resources of how to hold on to it. And I may completely fall apart and then just blame and shame myself for my hypocrisy and inauthenticity because I did not understand the vicissitudes, the journey, the acharei, what comes after the experience. There's another fascinating halacha. When it comes to Yom Kippur, the Rambam says that at the end of the day, when the Kohen Gadol takes off his holy clothes and he puts on his regular clothes, the day is over. The Rambam says two words, v'yotzei lebeisa, he goes home. And the question is, the Rambam says this in Hilchos Avodas Yom Kippur, the question is, the Rambam is not writing just the schedule of a person, he's writing halacha. He's writing law. He could say, yeah, the day is over, the Kohen Gadol finished the Avodah. Obviously, he goes home. I mean, where should he go, to the bowling alley, Mitzvah Yom Kippur? I mean, what should he go to, the pizza shop, in some Yerushalayim pizza shop? And what if the Kohen Gadol wanted to go to visit his mother? And what if he wanted to go to his sister? What if he wanted to sit in the Beis HaMikdash another 3 hours? What if he wanted to go to a Beis Medrash and learn Torah? The Rambam says, v'yotzei lebeisa. Yeah, obviously, it was a long day, it's night, he probably went home, and what should he do? But he puts it in the halacha. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I once heard from him an incredible insight. He said that is not a statement, it's a halacha, it's a law. And it may be the most important law of Yom Kippur. You were in the Holy of Holies, you finished the Avodah, and now, go home. Can you integrate it? Can you bring it to your home? And that may be sometimes the most complicated part. Because the Kohen Gadol says, I was in the Holy of Holies, I should go home. And what do you think happened when he came home? I don't know, but maybe. Mrs. Kohen Gadol said, Yankel, it's very nice you were in the Holy of Holies, but I was home a whole day with these kids. Okay? Miriam has a headache. Zelig didn't stop screaming. I thought I'm going to kill myself when you were in the Holy of Holies. Okay? We need to find you a new job. Let your brother be the Kohen Gadol. Do me a favor. And by the way, you didn't take out the garbage before Yom Kippur. You've already been gone 7 days. Take out the garbage. And if the Kohen Gadol is not worked out, he may look at himself. He says, I was in the Holy of Holies. This is what I need. I come home to take out the garbage. Especially the Mishnah says, Shivas Yamim Kaidem Yom Kippurim Afrishin Kohen Gadol Mebeisa. 7 days before Yom Kippur, he left his house to be in a cocoon of purity and disengagement. 7 days. So he's been in a different planet for a full week, and then comes Yom Kippur, the holiest of the holy. And remember what happens on Yom Kippur. The holiest person goes into the holiest place in the holiest time. So you have a convergence of Olam, Shana, Nefesh, space, time, and consciousness. Where the holiest space, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. The holiest person, the Kohen Gadol. The holiest day, Yom Kippur. They all converge into one. After 7 days of preparation, comes the Rambam and says, you finished, there's one more halacha. Yotzei lebeisai. Go back to the kitchen. Bring it all home. That's acharei, afterwards. In fact, how do you know you were in the Holy of Holies? If you can go home. If I can't go home afterwards, I may have been on my own ego trip. I may have been in very, very interesting and enthralling places, but it wasn't part of Hilchos Yom Kippur. It was a beautiful experience, an amazing experience. But the challenge of going home is, can I integrate it into my daily life, into my relationships, in my connections with other people, and my connections with people making space for their life, for their reality, for their emotions. Mrs. Kohen Gadol didn't get all the validation and all the accolades and everybody watching and seeing and enthralled by the avoid of the Kohen Gadol. We sing on Yom Kippur B'tseisa, Mare Kohen, the splendor of the Kohen when he came out of the Holy of Holies. That's the acharei. How does one do this? This was Palti ben Layish and Michal Bas Shol's not just genius, but spiritual genius and moral depth. He took a sword and he put it there. And this is a beautiful insight by Reb Chaim Shmulevich, the Mirror Rosh Yeshiva. He has in a Sichas Musa something very powerful. This is a symbol. The sword won't help. You put a knife, it's like I'll put a knife in my kitchen in front of the cheesecake, yeah? Put a sword. And I'll say, Rabbi Wire, if you eat cheesecake, you're going to be stabbed. Yeah, who's going to do the stabbing? If I want to eat the cheesecake, I'll look at the sword and I'll say, you don't tell, I won't tell. And I eat. And if I don't want to eat it, I don't need a sword. What's the sword? You put a sword in a bedroom. What's that going to do? What's the sword connected to? The Israeli Mossad? What is it, another beeper? What's going to happen? The sword is going to explode somewhere? No, it's cheref. You want to follow Shulchan Aruch? Follow Shulchan Aruch. You have Yer Shemaim, have Yer Shemaim. What's this? Chaim says really what the Chazal would express very profound ideas in brief words, in their own inimitable way, to capture a truth, to capture a depth. The word cherev comes from the word churban. Like churban. Churban means to destroy. The word cherev, because a sword was made, unfortunately, for destruction. That's why the Mizbeach, right, it says, you have to be careful not to use barzel. It says, barzel. You don't bring barzel, iron on the Mizbeach, because iron was used as a destructive weapon, and that shouldn't be touched with the Mizbeach. So there's a respect for the altar. The altar is there to create life and longevity and love and empathy, and therefore you don't touch the barzel, the iron, which is very often used for weapons, for cherev. So the word cherev comes from the word churban. When Palti ben Layish met Michal, the daughter of Shaul, she knew she was married to David. He knew she was married to David. They were both very, very great people. It was clear to them that for them to be together as a husband and a wife would be a cherev, it would be a churban, it would be destructive. It would be destructive for her, it would be destructive for him, it would be destructive for their soul, for their body. It would alienate them from themselves. They would have to live with an internal disalignment and impurity and dishonesty that would kill them. And especially sensitive people are very sensitive to these things. You know, if you have a sensitive body and you digest poisonous food, the impact is going to be catastrophic. You know, some people can eat whatever they want and somehow you don't see it. And they don't even feel it. But it's not necessarily a compliment. It's like a form of disassociation. When somebody a sensitive soul is more sensitive to toxicity than other people. You know, some people blame themselves and they shame themselves. You know, why can I deal with things that other people deal with? Because you're more sensitive. You have to know who you are. You know, sometimes people have a conversation that's empty or vain, and it doesn't affect them. Other people, it affects them deeply. And the reason it affects them deeply is actually a tremendous thing. It just shows you how careful you need to be with what comes out of your mouth, what goes into your ears, what goes into my body, what comes out of my body, my interactions. Not in a hyper-vigilant, obsessive, egotistical, self-conscious way, but in a balanced and deep and authentic way. It's showing up to life with presence, showing up to life with awareness. Every moment is sacred. Every encounter is sacred. A person is not a hefkeveld. A person is not a jungle. When a person respects themselves, you respect your soul, you respect your body, you know who you are. We wake up in the morning, we say, I'm in your presence, as it says in Tanya, a word is sacred, a thought is sacred, a behavior is certainly sacred. Michal and Palti had a clarity. This is a hard test. This is a difficult situation. And God will have to figure out how it's going to work out. But it's clear as the sun to both of us that for us to do something immoral would be a cherev. It would be a stab in your back, a stab in my back, a stab in your soul, a stab in my soul. But they both knew also something else. Humans are humans. All humans are humans. They used to say in Yiddish, there was a line, a mensch is not a mensch, und amol das euch nicht. Person is only a human being, and sometimes not even that. They know they're humans. And right now we have clarity. And when we have clarity, we don't even have a temptation. But people have weak moments. There are days when we are anxious. There's days when we're depressed. There's days when we're in a bad mood. There's days when there's things that trigger us. There are so many changes in people's lives. To be present in life is also to be vulnerable to the fact that I don't know what's going to happen in the next minute. And I can't control it. I don't want to control it. What happens in a week, in a month, in a year? Of course, if we maintain this type of moral and spiritual clarity, it'll be great. We don't need anything. We're good. But we know how people are. I can be in the middle of davening and have an extraordinary, what I feel, a moment of dveikus, of intimacy. And then 5 minutes later, suddenly, thoughts coming from all my coping mechanisms can hijack my brain. And I'm in some weird planet, not knowing if I'm coming or I'm going. I'm feeling guilt and shame and obsession and self-consciousness and thinking about this, and the mental chatter comes in. Anybody knows what I'm talking about? And like, what happened? Because the truth is as follows. The truth is that there's a soul in every person that is a chelik elekami mal, as we always say. The Tanya says the soul is a chelik elekami mal mamish. The core of the person is a derivative of infinite consciousness. It's not just created by Hashem. It's a manifestation kivayachal of Hashem himself. It's a spark of God. It's like a piece, like a fragment of Hashem, like the Shechina itself. The body is a Beis HaMikdash for the Shechina. V'shachanti b'soicham, not b'soichai, b'soicham. And in that sense, the soul is always one. The soul is always aligned. Soul is the divine energy, the divine light inside of me. And it flows, it cruises, it vibrates, it pulsates through our veins and through our sinews, through our cells, through our tissues, through the circulatory system. It circulates, it cruises through the human body, because the soul, the nefesh, the chelik halakam is manifested in the animal consciousness and in the body. And when my blockages are removed and I tune into that space, I'm a clear vessel, like a Beis HaMikdash. You're a clear vessel. You're translucent, you're transparent, you're alive. And you can even feel what it means to show up to life with joyful presence, with serenity, with tranquility, because when I'm aligned with the source of bliss, which is Hashem, and the source of goodness, which is Hashem, and the source of pleasure, which is Hashem, and the source of morality and purity and holiness and love, which is Hashem. So I'm a channel for that. Like the Gemara says, Ladafka boy, what does dveikus mean? Become an embodiment of God's qualities. Mahu rachum, af ata rachum, mahu chanon, af ata chanon. You're like a witness. The Navi wants to describe the Jewish people as atem eidai. God says, you're my witnesses. What's the definition of a witness? A witness demonstrates and tells the story of that which is not known. So you're the witness of God. In other words, you are a manifestation. You're the witness of what divinity looks like, of what holiness, of what purity looks like. And that's the secret of anti-Semitism. It's not easy to see God's witnesses in this world. You know, the Greeks used to say, kill the witness first. That's what the mafioso always says. First, kill the witness. You get rid of the witness, you're good. You can do whatever you want. So that's what they want to do with the Jews. Atameidai. Get rid of the witness. If you kill the witness, all the pugnaciousness. Did I just make up a word? Pugnaciousness? Okay. I saw it this morning. Somebody wrote Pugnacious. I don't know about who, but whatever. All the toxicity, all the poison, toxicity I use more often. But Pugnacious I like. All the pugnaciousness of people can emerge, free reign, atem eidai. There's no moral boundaries. The stuck in gut of the Welt. So in a very individual sense, this is the soul, and the soul is always one with Hashem, and it's called Yechida Shebenefesh. Now we have to realize we have 5 layers of consciousness, 5 layers of identity. The Medrash says the soul has 5 names. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. Nefesh is the part of the soul that lives in the body and is embodied through the body. All the biological systems that happen is all the nefesh. It's the soul running them. It's like the operational system of the body is called nefesh. So, for example, the respiratory system and the circulatory system, the respiratory system, digestive system, urinary system, all the systems in the body, that's nefesh. Ruach is considered breath. Ruach is ruach, like ruach is spirit, branded like ruchnius, the breath. And that's very much associated with the emotive dimension of the soul, which is why breath work brings up such profound emotion. Neshama represents the cognitive element of the soul, the ability for awareness, connected very much to the prefrontal cortex. And then you have chaya. Chaya is the spiritual transcendent element of the soul, the longing for meaning, the longing for truth, for authenticity. And then you have the deepest, which is yichida, which is one. And it has no definition outside of the fact that it's one, because it's Ein Sof, it's actual infinity in the person. It's yachid, it's completely one. Yachid u'meyuchad, yichida, we say in Hashainus of Sukkos, yichida liyachdach, completely one with you. Every day of the year we daven 3 times, Shachas, Mincha, Ma'ariv. Shabbos or holidays or Rosh Chodesh, we have 4 prayers. Musaf. The only day we have 5 is Ne'ilah. Why? Because Yom Kippur is a day that's designated to Yechidah Shebenefesh, to the 5th level. It's called Yom Shenischayev by Chamesh Tfilas. The whole day is a day of 5 tfilas. Yechidah Shebenefesh. In that place of Yechid, of Achas, there is complete oneness. And then there's no question who you are. You're just I'm a manifestation of Ein Sof, and there's a clarity of the person. This food is not for me. This conversation is not for me. This relationship, of course, it's not for me. I'm going to flirt and contaminate my Yechidah Shebenefesh. I don't need it. I don't want it. I have no craving for it. It's just taking me away from being joyfully present in the world as God's ambassador. Why would I want to do that? Tell me, why would I want to do that? Why would a lion want to become a mouse? Can anybody tell me? Why would a lion want to become a mouse? I have nothing against mice, as long as they're not in my house. Or even if they are, my wife doesn't see them. But why would a lion want to become a mouse? You're a lion, you're not a mouse. You're a warrior, you're not a wimp. Is that a word? Yeah. I don't like that word. And it's a very, very deep, deep experience. It's all great when I'm in touch with that. But let's face it, my animal consciousness, as we always say, also developed as I grew up. And it may have developed all of these coping mechanisms that hijack my soul or imprison my soul. And as a result of that, I don't even know who I am. And now I'm living with maybe terrible shame or terrible guilt or terrible addiction. All these types of coping mechanisms where I feel I'm too much or I'm too little or I'm worthless or I'm everything. I'm not centered in my own core. I'm fragmented, I'm scattered, and that's when I look for different things to numb me, to distract me, to fill my pleasures, because I'm not anchored in my own source of energy. I don't have inner bliss. So now I need this, I need cake, I need my phone, I need this fake relationship, I need whatever I need, validation, I need my ego to be nurtured, because I'm not in touch with me. Palti ben Layish and Michal understood this better than everybody. So what did they do? They put a sword right there. And they said, tomorrow, acharei, tomorrow, in a month, in a year, maybe in 2 years. I may have a bad day. I may go to shul and I may be triggered by somebody who will just tell me something and I will just lose it. I don't know. Maybe you'll say something and I'm going to be triggered. Maybe somebody will accuse me of something. Maybe I'll experience something inside myself or outside of myself. And at that moment, I won't know who I am. All I'll know is that this is my craving, but you know what? I'll be able to look at this sword. What does it mean to look at this sword? I'll be able to know, yesterday, a month ago, I had clarity. I knew who I was, and that's enough. It's enough when I can hold space for all the parts that are coming up with compassion and empathy, but not get overwhelmed and derailed and give them the driver's seat. Anybody who ever drove with a Jewish husband or wife knows the concept of a backseat driver. Somebody who tells you don't know what you're doing. Make a right, no make, especially before the days of Google Maps. You remember? I told you to stop in the gas station. No, but you're too arrogant. You know better. The backseat driver sits in the car and tells you what you're doing wrong. You know what? It would be nice to open the door and throw him out of the car. It's not going to work. And what if there's a little kid? And the little kid says, you don't know what you're doing, go here, go there. Those are voices in the car, and I may have to live with them throughout the journey. One thing don't give them the steering wheel. Because that could end me up, God forbid, not in a good place. Sometimes I'm in my body and I'm driving my car, and there's a voice that comes in, make a right, make a left, you're going to have a crash, you're crazy, you don't know what you're doing, why even driving a car, you're so stupid, you're ridiculous. Who even made you? Who makes people like you? Whatever it is and whatever driving means in your life. those are thoughts I deal with. I have to make space. They're part of me. But I make a choice if they're getting the driver's seat or not. Not cherev. When there's a cherev over there, there's a clarity. There were moments you knew exactly who you were. Even though now I don't feel it. I'm in another place. But I can hold on to that cherev. I can hold on to that obvious clarity that vibrated in my system. Maybe yesterday, maybe an hour ago, maybe 10 minutes ago, maybe 6 months ago. And say, you know what? This is who I am. This is who I really am. The moment the blockages are removed, this is who I'm going to be. And this is therefore how I'm going to live right now. We all have two types of animals. Either you have an ox or you have a goat. An ox can gore, shar shenagach. A goat can be very, very stubborn. Different animal souls develop different coping mechanisms. Sometimes my coping mechanism is of a par. A par can be very surrendered and subdued and submissive, but it can also get very angry and confrontational and gore. A goat can also be a very, very cute and delicious animal, but it can also be very, very sly and shrewd and stubborn. So the animals that were orphaned in the Beis HaMikdash were not just animals from a farm. They also represent the animals inside. Adam kiyakriv mikem karbon Hashem, from you. And as a result of that, with the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, he took the ox and he took the goat, and for once a year he brought it into the Holy of Holies. He showed the truth that even the animal soul comes from the Holy of Holies. Because if Einoid Mulvad, if everything comes from Hashem, it's not just my divine soul. Even my animal soul comes from Hashem. It's just that my animal soul has become so separated in its own consciousness from the source. So it feels it's alone in the world. The divine soul never feels that it's alone. It knows that it's a derivative of Hashem. But the animal soul becomes separate and therefore develops any type of tendency of an ox or a goat or any other animal. And all of these tendencies become part of my coping mechanisms to the point that I think this is who I am. This is my only personality. I may now blame everybody around me in my life for all my problems, not realizing that the most powerful thing I can do is look inward and fill my own void through my own bliss of my own soul and have compassion on the animal soul that in its struggle for survival and keeping me safe maybe developed all these types of instincts and tendencies in order to be able to bring me to be anxious or to have endless guilt or endless shame or to need endless validation or whatever my coping mechanism is, to be a people's pleaser, to be afraid of sharing my authenticity with somebody, to be afraid of feeling my emotions, to be afraid of showing up, to be afraid of being present. But once a year, when the achas, the yechida is revealed, the Kohen Gadol comes to the animal and says, come, let's go into the Holy of Holies. You also come from the Holy of Holies. You're the Beis HaMikdash where the Nefesh Elikis came into. And at that moment, he brings the blood in front of the Aron, which is the place where godliness is fully revealed. Hashem is revealed in the Aron. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. And there's achas lamayla v'sheva lamata. There's one above, but there's seven below. Achas lamayla represents the yechida, the achas, the divine soul, which is always one. It says in Shir Hashirim, achas hi yoinasi, my love is one. Yoinasi, my dove is one, because a dove is one of the few birds that remains loyal in its relationships. Most animals, they have a lot of different opportunities. But the yoina remains loyal to its mate till death. It's crazy. That's why we're called yoinim. Einecha yoinim. Achoisi rayasi yoinasi. The loyalty. So it's one, yoinasi. Achas lamaila is when you're in a place of lamaila, your higher consciousness is one. But then there's acharei, sheva lamata. Now I have to bring it down seven below. There's chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, chayd, yisoid, malchus, the seven midos of the animal soul lamata. Can the same blood be now brought down from achas lamayla to sheva lamata? In other words, can it be integrated into my system that when my animal soul comes back, and my animal soul is looking for its chesed, for its love, or gvura for its boundaries, or tiferes for its compassion, or netzach, it wants its victory, or Haid, it's looking to surrender, Yisoid, it's looking to bond, or Malchus, it's looking for confidence. The animal soul also wants all these things. But if I haven't experienced what healthy attachment is, and I live in a very difficult world, my animal soul develops all of these types of qualities, and my 7 midos become completely chaotic. So I may be looking for love, and I think I'm going to find it through flirting or through a crush. I'm looking for love, and I think I'm going to find it through working extra hard and getting fake validation from people. I'm looking for real attachment, so I do something in order to, because I desperately need a person's compliment. I'm looking for real connection, so I create situations and relationships and interactions that are taking me away from my true power, from my true greatness, from my true authenticity. And I could live in those places, and it's very powerful, it's very intense. So to bring down the achas lamaila into the sheva lamata, that's the most powerful thing. Now there's achas. Yom Kippur, there's always achas. But what about acharei? And here we come exactly to the reading of Mincha of Yom Kippur. Shachris Yom Kippur, you're going into the Holy of Holies. Mincha of Yom Kippur, you're talking about things that are very, very repulsive. And that's exactly the point. When a person in the highest place is not aware of acharei, that I'm capable tomorrow of ending up in the abyss, I may end up in the abyss. But if in the highest moments of Yom Kippur you could say, you know what? Part of being human is that you could sometimes be overtaken by a crazy urge. And you know what? Don't say se passt nicht. Jetzt passt es nicht, but tomorrow it's going to pass. I'm going to give a little parenthesis here. This is so important in families and communities as well. You know, sometimes certain people bring up certain topics. And people will say, oh, this doesn't happen in our community. This doesn't happen in our family. And se passt nicht. Rabbi Weiwei, se passt nicht. Se passt nicht. We don't talk about these things. It's beautiful, it's holy. I say to him, look at the Mincha of Yom Kippur. I say, se passt nicht Yom Kippur to speak about going to have a relationship with an animal. Se passt nicht Yom Kippur to talk about that. But somehow, for Chazal, es hat gepasst. You know why es hat gepasst? Because they understood truth. Torah is emes. And people could be doing disgusting things. There are sick people. There are people with poison, with toxicity. And if nobody talks about it, because the pasnish, what happens? They can do it freely, because the pasnish doesn't happen by us. So it's a whole subterranean culture beneath the surface, and we're not allowed to talk because we're too holy. That's not holiness. That's allowing innocent victims to suffer terribly because the pasnish. Because we have no dirt, we have no filth, we have no toxicity, we have no poison. If you haven't known, we're perfect. So the Torah comes and says, no, on Yom Kippur, dafka in the kittel, dafka when you're a malach. That's when you should know that tomorrow, in a week, in a month, in a year, a person is capable of being overtaken by all different types of instincts and emotions. And now is the time to address it. Now when you're in touch with your achas, now when I'm not interested in doing this, because I know who I am, I know what's true. Learn from Palti, learn from Michal. On Yom Kippur, when you have the achas, make sure you bring it down lamata to the sheva. Take that sword and put it right there in your consciousness, in your bedroom, in your bed. Look at it, say, you see this? You know what's true. In a week, this is your reference point. This is your paradigm. Even if you're not feeling what you're feeling now. But when it resonates, it resonates. You know now with every fiber of your being. What's authentic, what's a lie, what's a coping mechanism, what's true expression, what is a reflection of your divine soul, what is a reflection of my blockages and klipois that are blocking me. You know it right now very clear. Tomorrow I may not know it because I'll be overtaken by all these types of thoughts. But the cherev will allow me to have that connection always. That even if I can't feel everything, I'll be able to have such clear awareness of the type of awareness that I had, to the point that I'll be able to live and behave in my thoughts, words, and actions in the world I want to be in. So the lion doesn't have to become and suddenly be transformed into a mouse. And that's why you have to count that way. Achas, achas v'ya, achas, don't let go of the achas. When you go to 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, hold on to the achas. That's your guide, that's your core, that's your paradigm, that's your reference point, that's your foundation. Don't let go of the achas. Bring the achas, into shtayim, into sholosh, into arba, into chamesh, into sheva. It's not two separate worlds. Acharei. Go home. The Kohen Gadol goes home afterwards. Already in the Holy of Holies, he's preparing to go home. Because if in the Holy of Holies you don't prepare to go home, you're not going to be able to go home. You won't be connected. It won't be integrated. So you say, but I'm up there. I know you're up there, but God wants you to go down there to make a dira b'tachtainim, to make a home for him in the lowest reality. Shava lamata, all the 7 midos of my animal consciousness. And in order to do that, you always have to hold on to the achas and always go back to that achas. Because the achas is the place where we have the complete clarity of what's true. It resonates. It feels right on every level. Your thoughts are aligned. Your mind is aligned. It's objectively true. It's subjectively true. It's emotionally true. It's beneficial. It's productive. It's meaningful. It's also blissful. Now we also understand the 2 opinions, Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda. The word Reb Meir comes from the word oir, Meir, a light. The word Reb Yehuda, Yehuda comes from the word hoida, lahodat, hoidu, to acquiesce, like to surrender, ani modelecha. In a place of Meir, clarity. So Reb Meir says, you always start with achas. Achas v'shtayim, achas v'shalosh, achas v'arba, achas v'chamash. He always is connected to the source, Meir, light. In fact, in his Sefer Torah, it said, Kosnes Or with an Aleph. It says that Hashem dressed Adam and Chava with tunics of leather. Or, Ayin Vav Resh. So it says, by him, in his Sefer Torah, it said, Or with an Aleph. So everybody asks, how can you change the Sefer Torah? It's possible. The answer is, he saw in Or. In the Or with an Ayin, he saw Or with an Aleph. The leather wasn't a blockage for him. He saw light. So therefore, the achas he can bring into all the 7, and that's what we do on Yom Kippur. Yehuda is sometimes I'm in a state of haida'ah. Haida'ah means I'm moida to you, meaning I really disagree with you, but I'm moida. So Rabbi Yehuda says sometimes you have to start with the low. You have to start 7 and 1, 6 and 1, 5 and 1. You see the difference? Starting with 1 means you're in touch with the core soul, and then you bring it down and integrate it into all the lower parts of the self. Rabbi Yehuda says sometimes all I have is the lower parts of myself. I only have my 7, my 6, my 5, my 4. Take that, open it up, unblend it, and you'll see that also comes back to the achas. It's a question of direction. It's called milmayla lamata, from top to the bottom, or milmata lamayla. You start on the bottom, you go up. And in life, we have both aspects. Sometimes I don't have my achas in a conscious way. But if you go down to all of the other qualities, the midos, and you unblend them, you open them, you'll find that they all come from achas. They just went through a lot of chaos and a lot of brokenness, and this is what became of them. You know, somebody was sharing me about just such a, it was such a moving example. Excuse me. Somebody was sharing, they really did a lot of work on themselves in terms of inner mental awareness and healing. And they said something very powerful, that sometimes you have a child, I guess this was the story they were describing about themselves, who's really, really, deep and emotional. I mean, every child is deep and emotional, very authentic and sensitive. And a child had very deep needs for attachment and for love and for connection. But the person the child reached out to for that, probably mother or father or both, couldn't give it for whatever reason. Maybe they themselves were completely overwhelmed with life, didn't have the mental space, didn't have the ability, nobody gave it to them, whatever the situation is. And therefore they could not give it back. So it's almost like, if I stretch out my arms, I want to hug somebody I really, really love, and all they do is turn their back and walk away. So as an adult, I could say, okay, maybe he's having a really bad day. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe something happened, maybe he didn't realize, maybe he's fatrach, maybe he's listening to something. People are listening in their AirPods. You see them, used to be people were talking to themselves, but today nobody talks to themselves because you always say they're on the phone. Right? But that's what happens now. But if I was 2 years old or 1 year old or 3 years old, I won't be able to say, oh, my mother's having a hard day, or my mother didn't have a mother to take care. All I say is probably I'm not worthy of being hugged, I'm really unworthy. Maybe I'm unwanted. Maybe she really doesn't like me. Or maybe it's shameful to ask for love. Remember, the animal consciousness doesn't have this broad sophistication to analyze things globally and universally and spiritually. It's trying to survive. And wow, that was painful. That was like a stab, talking about a stab. You know what? Tomorrow I'm not going to do this. I did it 3 times. Each time they turned around. That hurts. So what's the conclusion? The conclusion is it's probably not a good thing in this world to reach out to somebody. It's really not a good thing to ask somebody to be connected to them, because all I'll do is get hurt, and that's it. I don't know that this happened, but now when I'm 40 years old, 50 years old, it's still happening, just in much more sophisticated ways. Or I may come to another conclusion. I am actually a pretty bad boy. There's so much shame. Wow, I should be ashamed with myself. I don't deserve anything. Wow, so now how am I going to survive? Maybe I'll become a people's pleaser. Maybe I'll never ask anybody for my needs. Maybe I'll never share a real emotion, because you're going to know how crazy and sick and weird I am. All these types of things, if you go back to those emotions and you unblend them, I promise you, you're going to find achas. You're going to find an innocent, pure soul that wants oneness. But it became what it became as a result of life stories. So Yom Kippur says, bring the achas into the 7. Rabbi Yehuda says, at least bring the 7 back to the achas. But don't forget the connection. So now, when the Gemara wants to explain who Palti ben Layish is, it says, Sheker achein ze Yosef. Hevel hayofi ze boyas. How can Yosef be called Sheker, chas v'shalom? Yosef was not a lie. Yosef was full of truth and authenticity. It's much more subtle than that. What's the difference between truth and falsehood? Truth and falsehood is not only if I say now is night, it's a lie. Truth is eternal. Emes is Aleph, Mem, Taf. The first letter, the middle letter, the last letter. Truth is always, it's consistent, it's eternal, because it's true. It comes out everywhere, because it's reality, and reality is always and everywhere. Hashem Elokim Emes. Hashem Elokechem Emes. Sheker doesn't mean necessarily it's a lie, but it means it could be today and tomorrow it's gone. In fact, the Mishnah says, it's interesting, certain types of impurity, you need mayim chayim. You need a mikveh of living water, spring water. Like a zava, certain things, paraduma, you need spring water. So the Mishnah says, what if you have a river and it dries up once in 7 years? You're not allowed to use it for the paraduma. It's not called living water. Why? Because in 7 years it's not going to be here. What do you mean? Now it's here. But since in 7 years it's not going to be here, even now it's not considered a real source of water, because it's not going to last. It's called Naharos HaMechazven, rivers that dry up. But really Mechazven means rivers that lie. Kazav is a lie. What makes them a lie? They're telling you there's water here, but in 7 years there won't be water. That means even now it's circumstantial. When something is Svas Emes, Tikoin La'ad, the Pasuk says. Emes is eternal. Since Yosef, of course his morality was authentic. Of course his grace was incredible. But since it was in a certain moment, in certain circumstances, and even Boyas, it was in a certain moment, in certain circumstances, it doesn't have the quality of eternity that Palti ben Layish demonstrated. It was true, it was absolutely true, but they didn't need it for later. The chiddush of Palti is Isha Yiras Hashem Hitisalo, the eternity of it, the longevity of it. How did he do that? That was the Na'at Cherev, the sword that he put in. This gives us perspective now what happens at the end of the story. After Shaul dies, David HaMelech asks if he can have his wife back. And what happens? Shmuel Beis Perek Gimel. The first story is Shmuel Aleph Yud Ches. This is Shmuel Beis Perek Gimel, the last line. Vayishlach ish boishes, vayikachem me'im ish, me'im Paltiel ben Layish. Ish boishes comes, and he sends for Michal to come from Paltiel ben Layish, from Palti ben Layish. Next turnover. Vayelech Isa Isha, Vayelech Ita Isha. Her husband went with her. He accompanied her. Halach ubachei achareh ad Bachurim. He went behind her and he was weeping until a place called Bachurim. Vayomer elav Avner lech shuv vayashav. Avner said, "Now you can go back," and he went back. And Michal was reunited with her husband David. So the Gemara asks in Sanhedrin, why was he crying? What was he crying? If he was married to her, I understand, but if he wasn't married to her, so he should be happy. Thank God we can get rid of the sword. He has a sword for years. Out! Now he can actually get married to somebody. He may have appreciated her and respect her. And the Gemara says something unbelievable. The emotion of what they have been through together, fighting for the truth, was so intense. And he knew life will be much easier now. But that precious uniqueness will not be here. That's what the Gemara says. That mitzvah, that divine authenticity that they both touched was so meaningful to both of them that it just triggered so many emotions. And this teaches us also the power of what Palti ben Laish and Michal had a deep connection. But it was a connection that was of a unique flavor, a unique nature. Not everybody can have that type of connection. Usually with genders, one has to be very, very careful because, there's the halachas of Shulchan Aruch about genders are very, very real and authentic. And people who are not careful with them often stumble in very, very horrible ways. We have seen the greatest of the great who were not careful in halacha when it comes to these things, and it produced catastrophic results for everybody. But they both knew that they withstood the test. They both knew it. Nobody else saw the sword, but they knew it. And this was a moment where it finished. So even though they were grateful that now life could maybe come back to normalcy, but there was such an intense emotion of what we went through and what we achieved, what everybody achieved there in their own psyche, in their own reality. And the Gemara says, what's Bachurim? We never heard a place called Bachurim. And he says it's a Tanakh's way of trying to say that he remained a Bacher throughout. That's what he remained a Bacher throughout. And she goes back to David. Michal goes back to David. Her original husband, who Shaul married her father married her off to David years. So now everything comes together. That whenever a person, you remember the days of Kodak? You remember? They called it a Kodak moment. You remember a Kodak moment? That's what it is, I realized. Not Cherevis is a Kodak moment. What's a picture? Why do we take a picture? Today people take pictures non-stop because you could. But Amala was an avoider to take a picture, right? You had to have a camera. Somebody had to develop the negative. You remember what it was to develop a film? It wasn't simple. The dark room, etc. So you took a picture with achrayas. We're taking a picture. What's the picture? The picture is we want to capture a moment. Why do we want to capture the moment? Because acharei. Because tomorrow we're not going to have this moment. So if we're not going to have this moment, what's the picture going to help? The picture is going to help that you're going to look at the picture and say, wow, that's what it was. Okay, now with a picture it's more external, but I'm talking about the picture within. Palti ben Laish teaches us that in moments of greatness, Rosh Hashanah, Aseret Simei Tshuva, Yom Kippur, Ne'ilah, Yechidish HaBenefesh, Achas L'mayla, it's a Kodak moment. Take the picture. Take the picture doesn't mean not to be present. Take the picture means take it in. Look at it, see it, and say, if this is it, this is it. Tomorrow, I'm not going to say this is it, but I'll know that this is it, because I have a picture. I can go back to that picture of Achas L'mayla, so that the Sheva L'mata can remain always aligned, always connected, so that even in my vicissitudes, I could remain completely anchored in the truth of my soul. So when I make a resolution, a person makes a Kabbalah Achlata, not in a moment of weakness, but if it's in a moment of strength, if it's in a moment of clarity, I have to ask one question, great, what's Acharei? What's going to happen when the thoughts come in? What's going to happen when the emotions and the instincts come in? And the answer is, if you had real clarity, if you had real awareness, real identity, doesn't mean there's no obstacle, doesn't mean there's no challenges. And of course, if I was fooling myself, I was fooling myself. What we're talking about, a person is not fooling themselves. Palti ben Laish and Michal gave us the recipe for emes. Isha yiras Hashem hitishala. The true yiras Hashem that endures. Svas emes tikon la'ad. When a person can hold on to those truths through thick and thin, so that even on a darker day, and even in acharei, and I may be facing sometimes Chalila an abyss, I can hold on to that frequency of trust, of love, of faith, of compassion, and of truth, and of authenticity. Everybody have an amazing, amazing week, a Gmar Chesed Tova, a good gebench yar, your most blessed and incredible year yet for you and all your loved ones, B'tach Klal Yisrael. Hashnaz Geula v'Yeshua. May we see Mashiach Tzidkenu take it from Miyad Mamash. Amen. A good gebench yar. Next week there is a class. Be'ezer Hashem, a Sukkah's class, Tuesday, 9:30. Thank you. Oh, wow. Okay. Ask for all the good things. You'll put in Oyel. It'll come on. Oyel Chabad will come on. Okay. Trump inspired you? I'm just joking. Just 1 second.